Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Today we have back with us Jeff Stukey and Kirk Ashburn, who are co-founders of Wealthspan Advisors, and we'll be talking about financial planning for couples. Jeff and Kirk, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having us.
Hey, thanks, Mike. Good to be on.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this because I know you guys take such a unique approach to serving your clients, and I want to talk about couples because that's a really unique demographic is couples and all the nuances there. But give us a little bit of background on Wealthspan and how you're different than other financial planning firms.
Yeah, great. Thanks for asking. Great to be here again. You know, Wealthspan really is a firm that's combining aging science with wealth management. It's the intersection of the two. And, we had Dr. J on last time, and he kind of talked about aging science and the study of how people age. And an awful lot of financial planning firms have sort of used averages and best guesses when designing plans for clients. And we just really think it's really foundational and important that we have a really good understanding of lifespan for clients as we help them plan, because an awful lot of people are worried about running out of money in retirement, right? But it's an unfounded worry if you don't have a good understanding of how long you're going to live and if that's even a risk to you. So the name Wealthspan implies we need to determine how long someone's wealth needs to span to last all of their life, especially for they and their spouse. And so that's how we're different. That's how we start being different. And then our planning process and all the things that we do to help folks really kind of hyper personalize a plan for themselves is where we kind of get to a place where we create what we believe are better outcomes for clients because they're more informed, they're making better decisions along the way. And it's all foundational in that intersection between wealth management and aging science.
And I love how aging science, it's a thing, it's a science, it's a technology, if you want to think of it like that, not necessarily like electronic technology, but it's a thing you can hang your hat on and really talk to a specific point to say it's not 80, 90, 92, 87. It's a number that is specific to each person. And then when you dial that into, okay, now couples are typically different in that maybe the wife is statistically known to live longer than the husband, but is that always the case? Now we're going to layer in aging science. So let's talk a little bit about financial planning for couples as a whole. What is the approach you guys take?
So the big thing that we're looking at, and especially you talking about couples, and just to make more of a point on the aging science of that, is that there's usually, in most cases, a big difference in that life expectancy. Big meaning could be 10 years, could be 15 years, and that's just statistically what it's been. And when you start doing that analysis for them to show, and again, if there's an additional age difference, like in my case, there's 4 years between my wife and I, but I've seen even in larger ones, but you put that 4 years in and then extended life expectancy, a spouse can be without their loved one for, like I said, 15 years. And quite honestly, every time that I've been in a meeting with clients, they don't even think about it. And it's one of the first times that they've actually thought about that they're going to be alone. And going through the different concerns that a lot of people have, outliving their income, the market and interest rate risk, taxes, all these things that they've thought about a lot, but unfortunately over these generations, a lot of the times the wife has not thought about this, and it's just been more recently that both people are getting involved. But a lot of people that I've worked with, the wife unfortunately doesn't have a lot of that experience, that the husband's always taking care of this. So when you bring up the point and show them their life expectancies, and to see that they could be without their spouse for a considerable amount of time, it really shocks them, because now they really have to think about, wait a minute, I don't know where things are. I don't know how that was done. I don't know who we were working with. So that starts to create a major issue. And one of the key components to this life expectancy, and really showing it to them, it opens up all these other questions, which become a very important part of the overall planning process.
And I would suspect that planning for retirement as it relates to Social Security has its own set of, well, if this, then that. It's got its own set of, contributing factors. But then when you start putting in lifespan and then the science of aging into that, wouldn't that make some of the traditional Social Security claiming, strategies need to be adjusted a little bit?
And that becomes a major address, because now, do we wait, maxing it out, waiting until age 70? Do we take it sooner? Sometimes it makes a difference to take one sooner than later. And obviously, having a couple, you have two choices now to really say, which one do we take? Which one do we take longer? And that becomes a major planning process. And because so many people and so many couples, this is one of their major income sources, throughout their retirement. And that becomes an issue when, especially, today, dealing with inflation. And we'll say, luckily, they really increased Social Security this year with a major inflation factor. But does that really help as much as planning their other assets to live and, be there for as long as they live? And the correct planning, sometimes people go, well, I don't have enough. Well, then they want to take more risk, and all these different factors of how much income do I need starts to affect all their other decisions. And Social Security being one of the biggest ones, would say years ago, people just said, well, I'm going to take it now because I'm retired, right? That was the easy decision. And I'm going to get my, Social Security, I'm going to get Medicare, and that's what I'm going to do. Well, now you have to think about it a little bit longer, because how long are you going to live? When it's not enough, now what?
Yes.
Yeah, Kirk, I think I was just going to say, it might be good to share an example. And this is one that we've worked on recently, where the husband was the main breadwinner. He was going to have the largest of the Social Security payments, but he didn't have longevity on his side. So he was likely going to pass long before his wife did. And it sort of seemed like, well, maybe he should start taking Social Security as soon as possible then, so he can get as many dollars from Social Security as he could. But many people don't understand this. Two spouses receive Social Security. When one of them pass, the remaining spouse keeps the larger of the two checks for the remainder of their lifespan. So in this case, the wife is going to take, because he was the main breadwinner, she's going to take his larger Social Security payment for the rest of her life. And if she's going to live into her mid 90s and he, unfortunately may pass in his, early 80s, and we want her payment to be as large as possible, knowing that there's going to be an impact to the income when one of those Social Security payments is lost. So, even though he's going to pass sooner, maybe it makes sense for him to wait till age 70 to take Social Security, so he's maximizing that benefit, knowing that the recipient of that benefit is going to be his wife, and she's going to keep that well into her 90s, if in fact she lives for that long. So it seems sort of counterintuitive sometimes, but that's why it's really important to include aging science as a part of the equation, so we know that we're making an informed decision about when to claim Social Security and who should do what when.
Yep. And the thing with Social Security, I'm sure that you guys work with your clients on this, but I've heard that it's like, once you make that allocation, it's pretty much irrevocable. So you better make it wisely up front, so knowing all of these factors to make that decision is super important regarding anything. But some things can be unraveled, Social Security not as easily as others.
And that just brings the point what Jeff was saying. In this case, when you're losing one of those Social Securities, no matter which spouse it is, and in this case, it was close to $25,000 a year that would be the loss of their income. So this is why planning their assets accordingly to make sure that they're going to be there to pick up that drop in income, and making sure that those assets are lasting as long as they do. And I keep saying that, but that becomes this factor in how you plan and when you plan, because How many times have I met with people and they come in, they say, yeah, we're thinking of retiring in 1 to 2 years. And I'm like, so what have you been doing up to this point in planning? We've been investing, right?
Yeah.
That's the number one thing you hear. We've been investing. We've been doing our 401k. We've been doing our other assets, but there's no plan behind it. They're making that Social Security decision, 60 days before they're about to get Social Security. So there was no planning involved. And when you sit down in this specific case with this couple, they're close to that same situation. But luckily and fortunately, they've invested well over many years, so there are assets there to pick up those shortfalls. But that was one of the major factors when sitting with them, literally just on a piece of paper, and one side just showed them, here's your life expectancies, right? And to see that side by side, the wife was like, whoa, wow,
Yeah.
I didn't think of that. And then the next thing to say, and you realize when that day comes, this amount of money disappears. You no longer will be having that come into your bank account. And that becomes one of the big emotional pieces when someone retires or they lose one of the Social Securities, but specifically the first time is when they retire. The one thing that isn't coming in is that check, that automatic deposit.
Yep. You hear like, inflation went up or down, and that means my rate of return on CDs or whatever is impacted, and that's horrible. Well, that's like tiny fluctuations. You talk about taking one of the spouse's Social Security check, it could be hundreds of dollars a month. That's a big hit.
And that's what really, makes them have that emotion to understand that planning can't wait. And so many people think that it can just wait and wait and wait until I'm going to retire. And you think people, especially in our age, we've been in this age for a long time of the internet, being able to see so many things and being inundated with so many things. But unfortunately, a lot of people need to feel that emotion, that little bit of pain to go, oh no, I need to do this today. And seeing that income, seeing that life expectancy, which one is going to happen first? It's going, no, we need to make those decisions today. And unfortunately, that's the sometimes too late in certain cases. And I don't mean too late, in a horrible way, but now what? Now they have to jumpstart. They really have to kick it into gear to say, either I'm going to start investing more or we have to downsize. And no one ever wants to do that, because one of the big misconceptions that people make is that when they retire, they spend less. And statistically, and at least in my practice, and I think it's in many, does anybody want to spend less than they were spending before retirement? And the answer is usually no. And the answer is usually
now they have time to do the things they were putting off and travel and all that.
That's right.
Right. So that makes it.
We've been talking about some of the aspects of working with couples. Is the lifespan of the wife the thing we've been focusing on here? Is that the major difference, or are there other risks and considerations that couples need to consider?
Well, and what we're doing with the life expectancy, we're also looking at the healthy life expectancy.
Yeah.
And that having now a discrepancy potentially in life expectancy between husband and wife or the spouses, now it's shown, okay, let's just say there's a 10-year age difference, not 10-year life expectancy difference. Well, there's also this healthy life expectancy. And when we're sitting down with couples and showing them that, okay, here is this time period, what we call where the healthy life expectancy kind of ends, now you have to think about care. That end of life care, that doesn't mean you're incapacitated, it just means you need additional care. And that could be 4 years, that could be 7.2 years. Well, that costs additional money. So, traditionally people think they have to go into some facility and get care. Well, no, most care today is done at home, but that still costs additional dollars, because, and working with many physicians over the years, they know to stay at home, the person is going to be healthier for longer. They're in their environment. There is a place they feel safe. Now, some people can't help it. They need that much care, but we know we want to stay at home as long as we can. And sometimes that's making decisions where a lot of people, we call it downsizing, but it might just be, changing the lifestyle of their home, meaning from a 2-story down to a ranch. So there's more capabilities. But again, that's planning the money out, where one, for that change, but two, for the level of care they need. Someone coming in and taking care of them for a couple hours during the day, making sure they take their medications, whatever it is. But it's a level of care that's going to cost a certain amount of money. So another additional cost we look forward to helping them plan for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great point.
Like I would say, one of the biggest risks that we can try to overcome when working with couples isn't even a financial risk; it's a peace of mind risk. So, there's an awful lot of couples we work with, and we know that a couple is going to lose one of the people in that couple. A spouse is going to pass, and there's going to be obviously emotional pain that goes along with that. But if you add financial pain on top of that, you've got a much more dire situation. And so what we really try to do when we're working with couples is make sure that both parties to that couple have an understanding of what's going to happen when they're left a survivor, when they're left on their own. What's going to happen to my income? How are we going to replace that income? What's going to happen with my house? How am I going to access my accounts? All of these things we address with them so that we can overcome that peace of mind risk and really give them a path forward so that they can confidently face their financial future with a lot of knowns instead of the unknowns that we found a lot of people end up with when they lose their spouse.
Yep, huge. I mean, I think this is just so, when we're talking about couples, these are some of these big points and considerations to think of. We talked a little bit about that example with the Social Security. Do you guys have a good example or case study on how aging science impacts couples?
Well, I would just real quick, Kirk, I'll let you jump in because I know you've got one that you've just recently been working on. But I would just start by saying, one of the main differentiators for Wealthspan is that we do use aging science. So a lot of advisors out there, and I've been a part of many groups that do an awful lot of planning for advisors, and they just plan for each spouse to live to age 90. And as long as the plan works out to age 90, everything's going to be okay. And if there's a 2-year, age difference between spouses, that doesn't seem like a really big deal. Planning for both of them to live to age 90, and one of them is going to pass sooner than the other one by 2 years, right? So there's 2 years difference. But when you incorporate lifespan planning and health span planning into the mix, like Kirk said earlier, it could be a 10, 15 or longer year gap. And then, you've got some real planning to do to try to fill that gap. And that's what really differentiates the planning that we do from what other advisors have been doing. And Kirk, yeah, you can give the recent example. And I know that the couple that you met with had met with other advisors, and you can just kind of tell them what their experience was and why they decided the lifespan planning way was a better way for them.
And it comes down to, it's like we've been talking about life expectancy in a certain way. Well, the one thing that I like to bring up with this experience, it's not about when you're going to die. It's how long are you going to live? And that was really one of the differentiators. Now they could see in a certain way that, like, we need to do things now, meaning the things they want to do. They've been doing things that they've had to do, meaning support the family, save money, do this. And sometimes people wait too long. But in this case, for this couple, they were really saying, no, we are going to make these decisions today, where they both could be working longer. They easily could. Jobs are secure. But this became a decision of how they wanted to live their life. And included, thinking about spending time, I'm in the Midwest, so they wanted to go spend more time in Colorado and doing more hiking and maybe getting a small cabin. Also spending time on the East Coast, that time that they really want to enjoy, going to other places they haven't seen, and hike and do things that they can do now. Because waiting to do that any later, potentially, they may not be able to do it physically or mentally. And physically usually becomes the first thing with a lot of people is they can't go out and do the hike. They can't go get on the cruise ship any longer. So what really came down to the planning in this life expectancy side of it, that was one of the bells that went off, the ding, like, oh no, I'm making decisions today because I really want to live the life I want to live. And I'm not going to put off these next things, like maybe going to spend a month in Italy and trying all this great food, because when am I going to do that? But when I can do it physically and mentally, and that became a key component to how they really played it out and made a decision.
That's a huge mindset shift, isn't it? Just planning for that dot at the end of your timeline, the death, but let's plan for the life, living up to that and thriving and doing the things you want to do. And sometimes that takes some money and sometimes that takes, the aspect of rearranging some life goals. So I love that mindset shift.
And that becomes a major deal. Like I brought up the fact that not having that paycheck come in, and it really comes down to planning the assets to do it and making sure that they have a paycheck coming in. And that's planning out, where does their money go now? Because up until this point, they've just been accumulating money, right? And now they're in the phase that they actually have to use it. And not just their Social Security, maybe a pension, but using their other assets to supplement that, or to be able to make that decision to go purchase that small cabin, or put aside this amount of money to take that Alaskan cruise. But it is that lifestyle that they don't want to give that up, but they also want to do the things they weren't able to do. So yes, it becomes a major factor. And getting with people that don't know that they can make that decision is another extraordinary thing that happens, that they just don't realize they can do it. No one's ever told them that they can do that, and or they had the ability to do it. They're, see all these different things that are going on the internet or on TV saying, you need X amount of money to retire, or you need this. No, it's an individual life. It's an individual plan. And when I can sit with a couple like this specific one to say, no, you can do this now. You don't have to wait any longer. That was, that moment that I enjoy the most, because now they get to make that life decision.
Love it. So what's an example of applying aging science to a couple?
Well, I would say it's really important to determine lifespan gaps for couples and educate a client about that gap. So again, like often we find that the female partner may not have been as involved in financial decisions along the way. And so maybe starting to feel uneasy about, what happens after my partner is gone, and how do I make sure that I'm going to be okay? And so the planning that we do really revolves around, like, some of the decisions are, we talked about earlier, Social Security, when to claim Social Security, so we're getting the maximum benefit out of that. Which products do we use to fund our retirement? So we can create that paycheck that Kirk's been talking about. But we may not do that if we don't have an understanding of the lifespan of folks and the gaps that may exist. Healthcare expenses are a big one. We understand that the longer you live, the higher the probability that you have that you're going to need some help with those activities of daily living. And so how do we plan around that and have that conversation and make it meaningful, and make sure that those expenses are covered? The risk that we take in our portfolio and how much income we take from our portfolio are all very, very influenced by lifespan, and especially the lifespan gaps that may be in place when you're talking about a couple. So without that hyper personalization of a plan, if you're just, again, planning like most advisors do to age 90, a lot of decisions are very generic and very much based on averages. And, we talked last week, but, 95% of the time, people aren't going to die at the age that the averages say they will. They're going to die earlier, they're going to die later. But if we can determine a responsible way to find an assessment of lifespan based on characteristics and family history and lifestyle decisions, Then we have, and using that aging science we've been talking about, that's validated and researched over decades, then we have a much better way to build a hyper personalized plan for individuals and especially for couples, so that they can achieve the outcome they're looking for.
Excellent. Well, guys, any final thoughts that you would like to bring up on how couples should be using the concept of aging science? And I feel like this is such a new term that people don't really even know that aging science is a thing. But when you've explained it here, it makes total sense. And I think that most of the time, if a couple listening to this would call their financial person and say, tell me about aging science, they would just get, confused response. So if someone is interested in learning more about aging science and how that can apply to their personal or their financial plan as a individual or couple, what's a final thought, and how can they reach out and connect with you guys?
Yeah, I would say, obviously you're right. If someone asks their financial advisor about lifespan planning and aging science and how it impacts their plan, they likely would get blank stares. We obviously just believe that, again, it's foundational, and most advisors aren't doing it the way we do it. So if anything that we've said today is interesting to you and would compel you to say, yeah, I need a better understanding of lifespan and how it fits into my finances, we've got a website set up at Wealthspan Advisors. That's our corporate website, where you can get a lot of information about who we are and who our scientists are and sort of what our process looks like. We also wrote a book with some of the scientists involved in our group, and many other people have contributed to the book. I think you'll find it a great read, and you can get a free copy of that book, an electronic copy of that book, by visiting our website. Again, wealthspanadvisors.com. Scroll down on that first page just a little bit. We'll ask for a couple of pieces of information from you, and then you can download an electronic copy of that book.
Excellent. Well, Jeff and Kirk, thank you so much for coming on today. It's been a real pleasure talking with you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneurssradio.com.